My parents lied about Dad having stage 3 pancreatic cancer to trick me into giving them my $38,000 education fund for my sister's professional kitchen. But I found out the brand deal was fake and they spent everything. So I moved to England, and 3 years later, they got arrested for fraud. I, 25 male, am currently sitting in my drafty apartment in North London, staring at a PDF attached to an email from a district attorney back in Ohio. It's an indictment. 3 years ago, I left the United States with 2 suitcases and a heart so hardened I didn't think I'd ever feel anything again. I was wrong. Reading the charges, grand larceny, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud, I feel something very specific: satisfaction. To understand why I'm smiling at the prospect of my parents and sister going to prison, you have to understand the sheer scale of the lie they sold me. I've always been the steady one in the family, the background character in the chaotic reality show that was my household. My sister, let's call her Sarah, 23 female, was the star. She was always chasing something, modeling, acting, singing, whatever got her attention. When she turned 20, she pivoted to cooking. She decided she was going to be the next big food influencer. My parents, who have always treated her like a fragile ornament that needed to be placed on a high shelf, bought into it completely. They coddled her, bailed her out, and praised her for doing the bare minimum while I kept my head down. I had a separate path. My grandfather, a man who didn't trust my father with money, and now I know exactly why, left me a trust fund specifically for my education. It wasn't millions, but it was exactly $38,000. That was my safety net, my ticket out of our suffocating small town, and the funding for my master's degree in the UK. I had guarded that money for years, refusing to touch a cent of it for cars or trips because I knew it was my only way to build a real future. The nightmare started 3 years ago on a Tuesday night. I came home from my job at a logistics firm to find the house completely silent. Usually the TV is blaring or Sarah is screaming at her phone tripod because the lighting isn't right. My mom and dad were sitting at the kitchen table. My dad looked pale, his hands were shaking, and he was staring at the wood grain like it was the most interesting thing in the world. My mom's eyes were red and swollen. "Sit down, son," Dad said, his voice raspy and weak. Mom burst into tears immediately. She grabbed my hand across the table, her grip incredibly tight, her nails digging into my skin. "It's your father," she choked out. "The doctors, they found a mass." My stomach dropped. The room seemed to tilt. I asked what kind of mass, hoping it was benign, hoping it was a mistake. "Pancreatic," Dad said, looking down at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. "Stage 3. It's aggressive." I felt the blood drain from my face. Pancreatic cancer is a death sentence. I looked at my dad, a big, sturdy guy who coached Little League, and suddenly he looked frail to me. The power of suggestion is a terrifying thing. "We have options," Mom said, wiping her eyes with a tissue. "There's a specialist in Houston, an experimental protocol, but insurance won't cover it. They called it elective because it's not fully FDA approved yet." I asked how much, my mouth tasting like ash. "40,000, Dad whispered, "for the first round. We have about 2 saved up. We're going to mortgage the house, but with my credit." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. I knew their credit was shot. They had bailed Sarah out of credit card debt twice in the last year alone. I didn't hesitate, not for a second. This was my dad. "I have the money," I said. My mom looked up, eyes wide, feigning shock. No, that's your school money. We can't take that." "We're not talking about school. We're talking about Dad's life," I said firmly. "I can work. I can wait a year. I'll write the check tomorrow." They cried. They hugged me. Dad held me tighter than he ever had, whispering that I was saving his life, that I was the best son a man could ask for. It felt real. It felt like love. The next morning, I went to the bank. I liquidated the trust. I got a cashier's check for $38,000 made out to my mother because she said she was managing the payments to the clinic to keep everything organized and separate from their regular bills. I handed it over, and I felt good. I felt like a man who was protecting his family. For the next 4 months, our house was a mausoleum. Dad stopped working. He spent all day in his bedroom with the blinds drawn. He lost weight rapidly. I assumed it was the chemo. Mom said the treatment in Houston was remote consultation combined with pills they mailed him, which sounded weird, but I wasn't a doctor, and they were so convincing. I was working double shifts at the warehouse to cover the bills since Dad wasn't bringing in a paycheck and Mom was his full-time caretaker. Meanwhile, Sarah was buzzing. She told us she had landed a massive brand deal with a kitchenware company that was going to sponsor a pilot for a Food Network-style web series. She was spending all her time in the basement, which she had declared off-limits because she was building sets and didn't want anyone to mess up the sensitive lighting setup. I barely saw her. I was too exhausted, working 60-hour weeks, coming home to see my dying dad shuffle to the bathroom and back, looking like a ghost. The crack in the facade happened on a Thursday. I came home early because I'd thrown out my back lifting a crate at work. The house was empty. Mom's car was gone. Dad's truck was gone. I hobbled into the kitchen to get some ice for my back. That's when I saw the mail on the counter. There was a large envelope addressed to Sarah from a high-end appliance distributor. It was ripped open. I'm not a snoop, but something about the logo caught my eye. Wolf and Sub-Zero. That's not normal kitchen gear. That's rich people stuff. I pulled out the invoice. It was for a dual-fuel professional range and a glass door refrigerator. The total cost was $24,500, and right there at the bottom, stamped in red ink, paid in full via cashier's check. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sarah didn't have 24 cents, let alone 24 grand. And this brand deal she talked about? Brands give you equipment. You don't buy it. That's how sponsorships work. I went to the basement door. It was locked. I used the spare key hidden in the hallway frame, my hands shaking. I opened the door and flipped the light switch. It wasn't a set. It was a professional-grade commercial kitchen. I'm talking marble islands, copper pots hanging from a rack, the massive Wolf stove, the glass door refrigerator. It looked like a Michelin star prep station. It smelled of fresh paint and expensive lumber. On the counter, next to a stack of recipe books, was a binder labeled Business Plan. I opened it. The first page wasn't a contract from a network. It was a vision board. Sarah's Kitchen, launch 2024. I flipped through the pages. I found bank statements. My bank statements. Or rather, a copy of the check I gave my mom. And then a transfer receipt. The money hadn't gone to a clinic in Houston. It had gone to a joint account named S&M Ventures, Sarah and Mom. I felt cold. Colder than I've ever felt in my life. I went upstairs and searched my parents' bedroom. I needed to be sure. In the bottom drawer of Dad's nightstand, buried under socks, I found a bottle of pills. They weren't chemo meds. They were high-strength metabolic boosters.
Boosters. Diet pills. And next to them, a receipt from a Hollywood FX website for skin-safe pale makeup. They weren't treating cancer. They were staging it. I sat on the edge of their bed, staring at the wall. My dad wasn't dying. He was starving himself on diet pills to look sick so they could steal my education fund to build my sister a kitchen. I heard the garage door open. I didn't move. I heard them laughing. Laughing. Dad's voice was booming, not raspy. "I'm telling you, the steak came out perfect on that range," Dad said. "Best investment we ever made." "He's going to be so famous," Mom cooed. "And once the channel takes off, we can tell him that the treatment worked and pay him back, eventually." "He doesn't need to know," Sarah's voice chimed in. "He's happy working at the warehouse. He likes being the hero. It gives him purpose." I felt a surge of rage so pure it almost blinded me. I pulled out my phone and hit record. Ohio is a one-party consent state, meaning as long as I'm part of the conversation, I can record it legally. I needed them to say it to my face. I walked out of the bedroom and stood at the top of the stairs. They froze. Dad was holding a bag of takeout burgers. He looked healthy, flush. The pale makeup must have been washed off. Mom was holding shopping bags. Sarah was scrolling on her phone. "The treatment worked?" I asked. My voice was dead calm. Dad's face went white. He slumped instantly, trying to fake the posture he'd held for months, but it was too late. "Son, you're home early." "I saw the basement," I said, "and the diet pills, and the invoice." Silence. Absolute suffocating silence. Then the shift happened. The entitlement broke through the shame like a hammer through glass. "You shouldn't have been snooping," Sarah snapped, stepping forward. "That's private property." "Private property bought with my money," I said. $38,000. You stole it." "We borrowed it," Mom yelled, dropping the bags. "We borrowed it for the family's future. Sarah has a gift, a real gift. You were just going to waste that money on some boring degree in England. She's going to be a star." "You told me Dad was dying," I said, looking at him. "You let me think you were dying. You let me grieve for you while you were still alive." Dad straightened up. The sick act vanished completely. He looked annoyed. "We did what we had to do. You're tight with money. You never would have given it to her if we just asked. We needed to jumpstart her career. The brand deal required us to have a professional setup before they'd sign the final contract." "There is no brand deal, is there?" I asked. "There is," Sarah screamed. "They're watching. I have 500 followers and it's growing. You're just jealous because you're a nobody. You're just a worker drone. I'm an artist." "You committed fraud," I said. "This is a felony. Theft by deception." "Oh, stop being dramatic," Mom scoffed. "We're your parents. We gave you life. You owe us. And your sister needs this more than you. You're a man. You can work. She's delicate. She can't work a regular job. It stifles her creativity." "I want the money back," I said. "Now." "It's gone," Dad said, shrugging. "Spent. The kitchen cost $30. The rest went to incidental expenses." "Groceries, lighting, my wardrobe," Sarah listed off smugly. "Investments. I needed to look the part." "You have until tomorrow to return it," I said, "or I go to the police." They laughed. They actually laughed at me. "Go ahead," Dad sneered. "Tell them you gave your parents a gift. See what they say. It's our word against yours. And who's going to arrest a dying man? You think a jury is going to send a cancer patient to jail because his ungrateful son wants his money back?" That was the moment the bridge burned. I didn't yell. I didn't punch a wall. I went to my room, packed my bag, and left. But I didn't just leave. I spent the next 3 days in a Motel 6. I wasn't sulking. I was compiling. I knew the laws. Theft by deception. If you induce someone to give you property or money by creating a false impression of fact, like having cancer, it is a crime. Since it was over $7,500, it was a felony of the 3rd degree. I went to the police station. I sat down with the detective. I laid it all out. I had photos of the basement I'd taken before I confronted them. I had the diet pills receipt I'd swiped. I had the bank transfer records. But the smoking gun was the recording. I played it for the detective. I watched his face change from suspectful to disgusted. "He faked cancer?" the detective asked. "Yes. And you gave the money specifically for medical treatment?" "Yes. Here's the withdrawal slip where I wrote Dad's medical fund in the memo line." "This is grand larceny and theft by deception," the detective said. He looked angry. "I lost my dad to pancreatic cancer last year. This is sick." I filed the report, but I knew the wheels of justice turned slow. I needed to secure my own future. I contacted the university in London I had been planning to attend. I explained my financial situation had changed due to a family theft. The admissions officer was incredibly sympathetic. They offered me a deferred payment plan and a partial hardship scholarship. It wasn't full coverage, but it was enough if I worked part-time. I booked a one-way flight. Before I left, I did one more thing. I found the brand Sarah claimed she was watching. It was a mid-tier cookware company. I found the marketing director on LinkedIn and sent a polite message asking if they required creators to build professional kitchens before signing final contracts. The director replied 2 hours later, "Absolutely not. We provide equipment to our partners. Also, we have no record of Sarah Lassmame in our recruitment pipeline." I forwarded that email to Sarah. Then I boarded the plane. When I landed in Heathrow, my phone blew up. 40 missed calls, text messages ranging from begging to threats. Dad texted saying the police were at the door and I was ruining the family. Mom texted saying Sarah was crying and they took the stove as evidence. Sarah texted calling me a jealous prick and threatening to sue me. I blocked them. All of them. I changed my number. I deleted my social media. I started my life in London. It was hard as hell. I worked in a pub pulling pints until 2 a.m. while studying for my master's. I ate beans on toast for dinner for a year, but I was free. I was free of the toxicity, the entitlement, the lies. For 3 years, I heard nothing. I focused on my degree. I got a job in a logistics consulting firm in the city. I met a girl. I built a life that was mine, bought with my own sweat, not lies. Then, last week, I got the email. It turns out the police didn't just arrest them for stealing my money. My report triggered an audit. When I filed my taxes that year, I reported the $38,000 as a theft loss on Form 6484. I attached the police report number. This flagged their return for unreported income. The IRS started digging. They found that my parents had also taken out loans in my grandmother's name before she died. They found that Dad had been collecting disability benefits while working under the cover for years. And Sarah? She had applied for small business grants using fake invoices, the same invoices for the kitchen equipment she bought with my money. She altered the dates and amounts to claim she had purchased the equipment with grant money she hadn't received yet. Because I had provided the initial evidence in the timeline of the cancer fraud, the DA built a RICO light case against them, a pattern of fraud. The email I'm reading today details the plea deal.
They rejected. They wanted to go to trial. They thought a jury would sympathize with struggling parents trying to help their daughter. They thought they could charm their way out of it like they always did. The trial ended yesterday. Dad was found guilty of grand larceny and insurance fraud. Mom was found guilty of conspiracy and wire fraud. Sarah was found guilty of fraud and attempted larceny for the grants. Because they refused the plea deal and showed zero remorse, the judge apparently noted their stunning entitlement in the sentencing remarks. The book was thrown at them. Dad got 5 to 7 years, Mom got 3 to 5 years, Sarah got probation and 500 hours of community service, plus a permanent criminal record that will flag on every background check for the rest of her life. Good luck getting a brand deal with a fraud conviction. The best part? The court ordered restitution. The house is being seized and sold to pay back the victims, including me. I probably won't see the full $38,000. By the time the government takes their cut and the other creditors are paid, there might be nothing left. But I don't care. I'm looking out my window at the London rain. I have a degree on my wall, a career, and a clean conscience. They wanted a professional kitchen? Well, I hear the cafeteria duty in federal prison is looking for staff. If you enjoyed watching my family get served a dish of cold, hard justice, smash that subscribe button. It's the only thing in this story that doesn't cost $38,000.